We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
that's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Oderman.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom here on the Lions of Liberty Network. And if you're listening to this live, or if you're watching it live, I should say, or if you're listening to this on the Monday stream when it comes out, either way, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. That's coming up quickly. Can't believe that 2024 is coming to a close, and we are going to be roaring into 2025. Exciting times. Hopefully you had a chance to join the Lions of Liberty Pride and on an annual subscription and get one of our Lions of Liberty Christmas mugs. If you didn't, that's okay. I still have two mugs left. So if anyone between now and the end of the year joins the Lions of Liberty Pride with an annual membership, it could just be at our lowest level of $5 per month. Join and pay annually. I will send you one of those two mugs. Or if you just want to join the regular way to get the bonus content and all the other stuff that we give away, just join, and we'd love to have you on board the Lions of Liberty Pride. All right, with that being said, guys, I'm going to bring in my guest for today. He is a returning guest, and we were just talking pre-show, and the last time that I had my guest Mike Worton on the show was way back when Joe Biden screwed up the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which I think played a big part in him ultimately dropping out of the race and Kamala Harris taking over and ultimately Donald Trump winning. But we're not here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about the book that Mike has written. He has written a book called York Nobility, Renegade Royals. It's a work of fiction that I won't get into the details, but it reimagines a lot of history, but also ties together with historic events, which we'll get into. A really creative idea and something that I think could be of interest to anybody who loves politics. So, Mike, welcome back to Finding Freedom.
John, it's a pleasure to be back on the show. Like I said, it's, or like you said, it was 3 years ago that we last talked, and it's been a lot has gone on since then. So, yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit has gone on. I mean,
it's past year alone. Yeah,
two assassination attempts on President Trump. Just complete insanity, and it continues. And I'm sure 2025 will be just as crazy as the past couple of years have been too. Before we get started talking about your book, Mike, if you want to catch the audience up to speed on what's new with you since the last time you were on the show, and for those of you who know nothing about you, maybe just give a little quick bio about yourself.
All right, yeah. So I have been I've been on Liberty adjacent for at least a decade now, at least since the 2015 timeframe. And I first got into libertarianism through campaign for Austin Peterson for president in 2016. And then from there, I've been, I wouldn't say I've drifted away from libertarianism. It's more or less, I feel like my views haven't so much changed, but I try not to associate so much with libertarianism to a point where I just feel it's just a nonstop fight about ideology when there's a lot of like the big stuff's right in front of our faces. We never tackle that, which is why I was so surprised when I saw both Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump go to the Libertarian Convention. I'm like, okay, this is going to make some interesting changes in how politics are going to be coming around. And then, it's kind of funny when we see how how libertarians came in fifth this time. It's like, okay, I guess we're no longer the bronze medal party anymore. So I try to focus more on how politics and any type of governmental attitudes can be either workable, or can we figure out a way to get rid of them? So where the government can work, where it doesn't, can it get out of the way? And so my viewpoint is being sort of a long-standing public servant. So I've been a member of the military, both active duty Air Force and as well as the Air National Guard, which I still am to this day, almost 13 years in. And then I've also been a trained firefighter. I just had to redo getting EMT training because I let that lapse. But it's okay because my main character had a similar issue taking exams multiple times because they failed. So it's a real good connection, and the person became sort of like a role model to me. And then more recently, I became a substitute teacher, so I get to actually influence a lot of younger people. And I come to find out that having a person who actually cares about the education system can make a difference. And the fact of the matter is that our education system is incredibly broken, but it's about getting right people into teaching positions. And which is why, like from, I guess people would label people like you and I more closer to aligned to the people on the right in this sort of context. It's shocking how more people on the right aren't looking towards becoming educators themselves. They always complain about the education system, yet they cede the education of their posterity to the people they don't like. So this is something I think people should take note of. And it's not about teaching politics in classrooms, but rather attitudes. It's about energy. It's about how you come across as a teacher, because I really don't know what to say. It's a mixed bag.
On that, just for a little, we go a side tangent on education here, because I think you're onto something, and the disagreement, and I guess to state first, like you've kind of strayed away from the libertarianism, the Libertarian Party. I've done much the same, not wanting to associate with them anymore. Maybe our reasons are a little bit different, but I think we're aligned in a lot of ways on that. But to get back to teaching, I've always found it interesting how those on the right are huge proponents of homeschooling. And I get that. I have nothing against homeschooling. If people want to do that, that's great. Have at it. Homeschool your kids. If you have the time, the resources, the energy to do it, all for it. But at the same time, like you're alluding to here, there's a whole group of other children out there who are not going to be homeschooled, either because their parents don't believe in it or they don't have the time. Or so no matter what, there's going to be a large majority of society that is going to be schooled by public education. So just to kind of throw your hands up and say the only solution is to homeschool is ridiculous and cannot be taken seriously on its face.
And so that's kind of what my book series is kind of about. It's about finding what's the workable middle ground. What's the position where a majority of people can actually be beneficial towards achieving some sort of social advancement, and understanding no one ideology is going to win out in the end. But what if we took a plausible path in the past, and where would it be lead up to this day? And so this is where the big change happens in the book series, and it's going to be a trilogy. So only one book is out so far. The other two are mostly done. The story's complete. It's just like it's the finishing touches sort of here and there in the other two books. But the first one has been out for about a month now, and it's I got only a few sales so far, but hopefully this will help get some numbers up.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, and it's called New York Nobility, Renegade Royals.
So
it focuses on a connection between JFK Jr. and Princess Diana. So I think an interesting place to start is why did you select those two? I mean, very prominent people from history, of course, but why did you decide to focus on those two?
So this really comes back in this. It's funny because I know the exact moment I came up with the idea. It was about 2 a.m. on New Year's Day in 2023. The ball had just dropped. I was in bed and I was sleepless. I couldn't go to sleep. So I'm doom scrolling on YouTube. And I just finished watching season 5 of The Crown, which, mind you, if you read this series, you'll realize like I am not a fan of the royal family. I despise them so definitely. But I'm a sucker for really good artwork, and The Crown is probably one of the best shows ever made. It's just so well acted and produced, and it's a. I like how it of the royal family because it just works so much better than real life. And
Mm-hmm.
if you ever get the chance, yeah, definitely watch the show. But so I just finished watching it, and that's was one of the seasons where Diana's in it, and so I was on this fix about her, and so I'm like, and as I'm going through these videos, I find a video of her in New York in 1995, and at the very end of the video, the news report is talking about how she rumors were about that she had met in private and in secretly with JFK Jr. And then I'm like thinking, it starts like piecing it together. I didn't know that much about him, other than him being the president's son and like a few other things I've known throughout the years. So I start like piecing it together. I'm like, huh, well, if they were together and if he ever ran for president, and then it started coming to my idea like, oh my God, there was a possibility you could have had First Lady Diana. And I was like, right then and there, I started thinking, that is an idea. Like originally I thought, well, like, that's a streaming show idea. But then I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but you're gonna need a source material. So then I'm like thinking, okay, you could make a book out of this. And I was like, I'm originally going to like pitch it to someone. Then I'm like, and then a few months later, my boss fires me from my job. I was head of maps and records for the city of Detroit. And and I was like in a state of depression at that point in time. But I'm like, I start talking with other people, and then I was talking with my dad, and he's like, and he tells me, I think you've got a bestseller on you. And then the next day, I go up to him again, and I'm like, were you just saying that because I'm your son, or did you actually mean that? And he's like, yeah, I actually mean it. And so I'm like, okay, I'm doing this. So about a year and a half later, from that point, I have over 230,000 words on this manuscript, and the first 71,000 is New York Nobility. So the story it takes that point in time of history where John Jr. and Diana meet in 1995 in the Carlisle Hotel in New York City. And the details of this meeting are unknown. Like, this is one of the biggest what happened moments in history, because you're talking.
But that's factual that they did actually meet.
Yes,
Then okay.
yes, there are several accounts, and basically every book about him and her, there is always a mention of the 1995 meeting, because like if you got like younger listeners right now, they would not remember that these were two of the biggest figures in not just of their time, but probably of all time. Like one,
I mean, Princess Diana died because she was so popular, essentially, because it caused a car accident that killed her. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize it, but are you familiar with what one of the nicknames for John Jr. was? It was America's Prince.
Okay.
In a land with no nobility, like we gave one person a noble title, and it was him. Mind you, his sister doesn't get that treatment, and she's still alive. She's an ambassador right now, and they like, yeah, like, I don't want to be mean and like, oh, nobody cares about Caroline. No, she's a great, well known, but like, no, like her brother was the politician. I mean, look at how successful Bobby Kennedy was this year, and imagine if in another election, if there was like an election in the past where John Jr. was alive, they would have just handed him the Democratic nomination because they knew he would have walked right into the White House.
Without a doubt.
He was just that popular and that well-liked of a person.
So you focus on this factual historic event that occurred, which we know nothing about, which is a good place to start when you're writing a fictional book, because you can go a lot of different directions. So how did you go about, and I don't want you to give away the book. I want people to pick up and read it, but just talk a little bit at a high level, how you went about mapping out where you're going to take this story.
So I have a very big problem of just spoiling everything that I create, because I'm just like, I want you to know the ending. I want to explain the ending and stuff. So when creating this book, that's the problem, is also I wrote the whole thing before I split it up, before I talked with my editor, and before I started talking with the people who are helping me self-publish this. I was like, well, I could publish the whole thing at like 200,000 words, but that would be over like 900 pages of content, and I'm like, oh gosh, yeah. No one's gonna read that big of a book. But then I'm like thinking, okay, I'm gonna split this in two, and then I'm like thinking, no, I'm gonna split this in three, and then make it a trilogy, and then like kind of contain each trilogy, or sorry, each book in the trilogy to have its own kind of purpose. And this one is it's primarily focused on the relationship of the two of them, and how it's how they're still just human people. They have to deal with the fact of insane amounts of fame and notoriety, but also have to deal with the notion that they are destined for something more. It's not just about being famous and about like, what are you going to use that for? And so there's a lot of historical moments mixed in with the book that are real life things that happen. And that's what grounds this in realism. So I guess the best way to describe this whole series, and it sounds kind of goofy saying this, but imagine it being a more modern, or just not more modern version, but like like a newer time period for a Forrest Gump like story, where in Forrest Gump he's in all these historical moments in time.
Yeah,
correct?
that makes sense.
But now imagine that, but with two people who didn't exist for most of that period of time. Simultaneously, it's two of the most famous people on the planet.
So how much, because obviously they both passed away before a lot of these historical events, like you were saying.
Yes.
So how much, research and, thought did you have to put in to looking at the character of the two individuals and how they maybe reacted to situations when they were alive, and then map that forward and how they were going to react to real life events after they died?
So I read 5 books on her and 7 on him, and a bunch of other books about the time period and like anything that might be connected to a lot of this stuff. And so there's a lot of research put into all of this, and I still feel like I didn't get anything perfect. I missed probably several things, but also like 97 on and 99 on. These are fictional people entirely. These are people that did not exist. So these are characters that are fictional versions of real life people, and then that's what people need to understand. Like these, one of the I mean, I guess I can spoil one thing because like it would be really stupid for me to just kill them off in 99. So the plane crash still happens in 99, but they don't die. This is supposed to be like a change point in their whole situation. And so one of the fun, it's mostly a drama or a thriller mixed in with a lot of romance, but there's a few moments of levity within the story because there's a lot of weight in the story. So I need to like put out there like, oh no, they need to have some moments where the reader needs to laugh or be like, oh, this is kind of a little goofy at times. So immediately after this plane crash and after a death of someone close to John and this like this weight of the world, they're making important decisions, they're dealing with a massive change in their life. It just cuts to a moment of September of 1999 where they're playing on a Sega Dreamcast, and because I'm a Sonic fan, I'm like, oh, they're playing Sonic Adventure, and John mimics Sonic, and it's like, hey, he wasn't alive for it, so I can make him do that if I want. But it also showcases like it's a pop culture moment, it's a connection to the time period, and it's a moment of levity because then you go right back into the politics. And then that's the whole thing, is you really get a notion of the politics of the late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, it was a much better time for politics, or at least from the perspective of people not wanting to kill each other for disagreeing with each other. It was more understanding time.
That is true up until an extent, because I showcased like the dirty end of it by so there is one election in the story, and that's the 2000 election. And do you want to know which election that is?
The 2000 election?
Not
You're
that
talking-
so the presidential one is like mentioned several times and it's like in
Mhm.
the background, but there's
Okay.
an election in 2000 that's the
Yeah,
center
sure.
theme
Tell
of the politics.
if you want to
So
share that. Yeah, I'm not going to hold you back from.
so John, after the plane crash, and Diana totally encourages him. Like they make the choice, like, okay, we need to get involved in politics now because this is John's calling, and Diana's backing him up the whole way. And this is just as they're having kids and they're trying to raise their family. So John decides to run, and he runs for becomes senator from New York in 2000. There's just one problem. Do you know who else is running? If you remember who wins that race?
In 2000,
New York
that would have
senator.
been Hillary Clinton, right?
Yep. So they run against each other in the Democratic primary. And she immediately turns on him. It's like, you can't do this. I already declared I'm a candidate. I've got all the endorsements. I've got all the money. I've got all this backing behind me. I'm the first lady. You can't do this to me. And John's like, well, you're not really a New Yorker. I'm here for my people. And this accumulates with the big debate in the book. And instead of picturing him as this saintly politician, the last paragraph he gives, or his closing statements, I should say, are that he is a failure in a multitude of different manners. But every single time he's failed, he's picked himself back up and got back up and achieved something from that. And he says, this is the story of America. And he mentions several times, it's like, when the revolution started, we were losing, and then we won. When the Civil War started, the North was losing, then we won. When World War II started, we were losing, then we won. When the space race was going, we were losing, then we won thanks to my father. And that's the theme kind of going, is that America is a story of success rising up from failure. And that if you're just going to go off of people that are just only ever going to know victory, then they're not going to understand when they lose. And this is kind of like the downfall of Hillary in that sort of context. Mind you, she still sticks around because she's going to play a bigger role later on in the story. But yeah,
she's still sticking around now, so
Yeah.
she's not going to go away.
So and then if you see the cover, you can probably tell what the climax of the story will be.
Oh yeah, you got the Twin Towers there on the cover.
Because the ending of the book is 2001. So, and the craziest aspect, learning the whole thing in the story, was that John lived 11 blocks north of the World Trade Center. In real life.
That's in real life.
That's a 100% true fact. He lived basically a half mile away from the North Tower. So the key thing here is, okay, now I'm just trying to showcase to this audience for this alternate history is not although the focus is keeping both of them alive, the real focus is, what if John Jr. would have been alive during 9/11? And immediately history changes, because you're talking about the person in America who was probably the most famous person that would be directly affected by the event. And then you start seeing a massive change happen, because it's like something like that is going to impact someone, no pun intended on that sort of basis, but it on a really serious front, which, it's like, when you really think about it, the candidates that ran on 9/11 in later elections, like 2008, they were just super phony, Giuliani and
Rudy
Clinton.
Giuliani.
But meanwhile, John, that would probably psychologically impact him to a point where this would be a really good bookend for the war on terror, for all of these other things. So,
yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, you're talking about the Hillary Clinton angle, and having those two Democratic political machines, the Kennedys and the Clintons, butting heads against each other. I can only imagine in your next book, you probably get into, I guess it would be the next book, not the third one.
Yeah.
Maybe get into Obama coming on the scene.
Yes, he does.
And that family. So that would have been, I mean, not that history as it did occur isn't interesting. It's still very interesting, but it adds another element. If the Kennedy family, and the Kennedy family has not been wiped out, as we saw with RFK Jr. this year.
Yeah.
It's still very, very relevant, but I don't think anybody would disagree that John Jr. definitely had more political opportunity, more political
Hmm.
gift, and like you said earlier, if he wanted to walk in and actually be the Democratic nominee for president, he probably could have got it.
Oh, for sure. And this is where I like twist history a little bit. And so, well, I should say a lot, but okay, in the first book, history doesn't change much. The only real differences are both of them still stay alive. So the ramifications of their deaths don't happen. So like the royal family is like still like treated as like nobody likes them at all. So there's no sympathy for them. So this kind of puts a strain in the second book on the relationship Diana has with William and Harry. Because now you got to think like, what difference would it be if they would have had her growing up more, but at the same time, she's in America and they have limited contact with her because in the rare case where father's rights wins out, turns out it's not a good divorce situation because nobody wants Charles to be their dad.
So is she removed from the royal family in the book then?
Yes, to a degree. Like she can still
Mm.
visit, and they can visit her in New York or elsewhere, but it's like just there's still limited contact sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like Diana's the distant mother, and especially doesn't help that she has kids of her own with John.
Okay.
And so they have a boy born in 98 and a girl born in 2000. So
So the way you map out the chapters in the book are by year, and you talked about earlier that you actually have historical events in there. The way you do it
yes.
is by italicizing them and then sort of tying it together with what the characters' opinions on those events are. So I'm curious, how did you select the specific years that you did in order to write about? What kind of process went into that?
So it was the overall story of the trilogy is sorry, I'm looking for something here. The overall story here is it's taking place over kind of like my developmental time frame. My earliest memories are from 1995, which fits in great with this story. And then um, I started like looking up all these types of things, and I realized like I share a lot in common with John. And this is where like it became kind of a thing where it's like, okay, this guy's gonna be my new role model because so many people focus on his father, obviously because he's the president, but like John Jr. Man in American history. Like a lot of the stuff that podcasters and news people do today, he was kind of the forefront of that with George Magazine and how um, being a political commentator kind of like sprouted more from what he was trying to do, which was create a entertaining and informative medium for people to really understand politics in mass, like for the majority of people who were not political insiders, part of the Beltway crew, anything like that. You like the early mid '90s, almost nobody was involved in politics until like probably the 1992 election, with the way Bill Clinton and Ross Perot were coming on the scene and doing things like the talk shows, the way they were doing the get out the vote sort of things. So Kennedy takes hold of that. He's like, there's an idea here, and he partners with a person, and they set up a magazine, and it's informative but also fun. I mean, the first he's got Cindy Crawford on the first cover dressed up as George Washington, and she like she's revealing her stomach, and it's like, oh, this catches the eye, and yet it is super informative. He interviews a lot of famous people, and this becomes sort of like, whether or not it would have succeeded long term, I don't know. But this book series also does that. One of the changes is that George Magazine never goes defunct, and you get to see kind of a world where you have more or less a. So one of my favorite speeches is Dwight Eisenhower's farewell speech, And everyone always talks about the military-industrial complex line, but the line that comes immediately afterwards is that this is necessary to have, but it can be kept in check only with an alert and knowledgeable citizenry. And I feel like that's our biggest failing, is that it's not that the military-industrial complex exists, it's that our alert and knowledgeable citizenry doesn't. So this, I think, is kind of that part of that component, and John would have been at that forefront. So he leaves the magazine when he becomes I'm going to spoiler, he wins the Senate seat, obviously. So he, in this first book, is now.
I don't know how you would have kept writing the book if you had Hillary win. It just
I know.
So disappointing.
Well, so the thing is, John had two choices to make. He could either run for Senate in 2000 or governor in 2002, and either one he would have won. But I thought, because John would have probably made up for a better governor. Also, there's never really been a Kennedy who's a governor other than Schwarzenegger. But I kind of felt like I wanted to tie it into him following in his father's footsteps, which I'm going to get to that in a moment. But it also centers the story on DC politics, because at the same time, I don't know that much about New York politics, and I don't want the majority of the second book taking place in Albany when the majority of what people know happens in DC. So I want him to be centered to DC politics during a time period of the Patriot Act, the Iraq War, Hurricane Katrina, the recession, all these things, all this stuff that happens in the 2000s. It's no.
Just lost your audio there.
Have him at the center of all of this. And when it comes to being, he's going to be ingrained in the 2000s politics of the era. And Diana does do a lot of other stuff. She's that connection between the United States and the United Kingdom. And eventually that plays a much bigger role in the story down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And and then this also plays into one of the other major themes of the book, which is sons living in the shadows of their fathers, which I know almost every single male has to deal with that at some point in life, where they're always being compared to their father, where they're always being say, oh, you haven't lived up to your father's expectations or something of that nature. Somebody told John when he was 29, I believe, he said, your father was at this age was a war hero. He wrote a book and he was elected to Congress. What have you done with your life so far? And John's only response was, look, I'm not my father. And I think that's really important to take note of, and him, I think that it's really hard to feel sympathy for someone who lived a life of fame and fortune and good looks and all these other things, but the way he was treated was very poorly. If people don't, I don't know if anybody knows this about him, but he failed the bar exam twice as a lawyer.
I didn't know that.
And the tabloids personally just crucified him over that. Basically calling him dumb, everything, and then under the bun. And he, in all honesty, he probably had some type of
learning disability.
Possibly, yeah. It's because he even says multiple times, and I just feel like I'm different and all these other capacities. So he could have even been on the spectrum. We have no idea, because he died so young. He was 38 when he died. So. And he really kind of avoids all of this stuff. But it's fascinating to see someone like him, because from all the stuff I've learned, he's like a one-woman womanizer. What I mean by that is he could have, and he did have, almost every woman he could want, but he'd only do it one woman at a time. So it just means this guy was committed, but yeah, he was everyone wanted to be with him.
So he was a monogamous womanizer.
Pretty much, yeah. But he was with everybody you could imagine, and then eventually, his real life wife, Carolyn Bessette, it looked like a rocky relationship, and basically all signs point to eventually they probably would have gotten a divorce before they both died in the plane crash, along with her sister Lauren, in July of 1999. So Honestly, that's all. All of this is up for speculation. This is just all fictional stuff. So I have it so that he finds a way to break it off with her, and then him and Diana pursue a relationship in private. And their first outing together is they set this up, and it's going to be at the Clinton inauguration in 1997 of his second term, and they rig it so that they sit next to each other at the inauguration, and everybody immediately is like, "Oh my God, this is the most perfect couple ever!" And so they're like, "Okay, everyone took the bait." And so the day she dies in real life is the day that they get married.
Mm.
And they decide, instead of a big wedding, especially since Diana had one of the biggest weddings of all time, they decide to elope. And they do so on Liberty Island. And
Is that a real island?
where the Statue of Liberty is at, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
So
didn't know that
yeah.
was called Liberty Island. Okay.
Yeah. It's called Liberty Island. Yeah. So they get married. So this ties in again with the notion of everything focused around New York, because there's a lot of New York landmarks throughout the entire book. And then as they're getting married, they have a couple of fictional people I throw into the book, who I name after my parents. And I do this because what made me so amazed by this, by doing all of this, was that both John and Diana were about the same age of my parents. So I'm thinking, to a lot of people of my generation, and I forgot, how many years older are you than me?
I'm 41, so.
Okay, so yeah, you're only 8 years older than me. Yeah, like even for you, like these are people who could have been your parents, and so you kind of feel like this paternalistic link to them, and the fact that, like they died so young, and now you're at that age where you're beyond what both of them were at, and they made it to 36 and 38 respectively. So he's like, oh gosh, and
it is crazy. I mean, just to touch on that for a minute there, because I do think about this. Historical characters like that, like John and Diana, dying so young. And of course, Diana coming from the royal family, marrying into that, and John coming from the Kennedy family. Of course, they had some leverage on their fame to help them to get to that point. But it is amazing that the impact and the celebrity they had at such a young age. And I look at that, like, compared to, me being 41, it's like, that's got to be incredible. It's got to be very difficult to deal with that amount of fame at such a young age.
That's why I think there's like, I'll get to Diana in a moment, but I would like to say there's probably four groups of presidential kids. You've got the screw ups, which would be like someone like Hunter and a multitude of other kids. Then you got the shy nobodies. These are the people that just don't want the spotlight at all. They just try and hide from
Chelsea
who they're
Clinton,
pretty much, yeah. And then you got the people who follow in the parents' footsteps. That's, you got George W. Bush, you got Jeb Bush, you got who else would probably be? You could probably say some of the Trump kids are in that vein.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the fourth category is John Jr. Like, he gets a category all his own, because so he was born a few weeks after his father won the presidency. He's the only person to ever be born as the president-elect, and so everybody knew him the moment he was born. And actually, I'll spoil this. There's a birther joke in the second book, because a lot of people don't remember that Hillary Clinton was the one who started birtherism about Obama. So I try and do the same thing, and it's like, no, this is literally the only person you could never make that accusation against. It's like, he wasn't born here, and it's like, we all remember when he was born. So,
that's pretty funny.
I play on history a lot, where things still happen, they just happen differently. So like certain things still get said that get like, you're like, oh, but like, so it's the same exact thing that gets said from this timeline, but it has a different meaning, or it's like the same people are saying it and they're like, why are you saying this?
So speaking of, things playing out differently, I'm curious to get your perspective on RFK Jr., his rise here, into the public space in the last 2 years. You started writing this, I think you said around the beginning of 2023. I saw RFK Jr. speak at PorkFest. That would have been in July of 2023, when he was, really making his push at that time to get the Democratic nomination for president. But not that he wasn't known before, but his popularity really skyrocketed in the past. I should say maybe not his popularity, but his name recognition. Being a Kennedy, he kind of came back onto the scene, at least to a younger generation. I'm sure an older generation still remembered him. How did that play into at all how you wrote the story, or maybe it plays into the later chapters?
There was a part of me that was like, when I was writing this, and he announced after I started writing, so this did kind of play in together, and then I was like thinking, wonder if I could get this book out in time before his election, and I could give him a copy, and then maybe this could influence the election at all, this could sway people to vote for Kennedy, that sort of thing. But it's it came out way I didn't meet any of my deadlines, and I was just pushed back and back and back. But seeing what we saw, I think the momentum started dying out very early on when he became an independent, which it's really shameful because he still is this pretty awesome political figure, at least for today. But he still won out. This is a guy who gets to claim a cabinet post and the ear to the president, and he still got fourth place in a presidential contest for not even running. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. You beat the Libertarian candidate.
I know that's the most insane thing is and I'm not trying to be antagonistic toward Chase Oliver or the Libertarian Party in general, but it's
okay. You can be antagonistic.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, okay. If John says so, I'm happy with that. Okay. Looking back at this election, both Trump and Kennedy gave olive branches to the Libertarian Party. Mm-hmm. And a lot of hardcore Libertarian Party members kind of said, screw you, we're not going to accept that. Meanwhile, their candidate didn't perform very well. And I'm just going to say, I voted for nobody on the ballot. So my vote's a secret. I'm not going to tell anybody what it is. But honestly, seeing how the Libertarian candidate lost to the guy that dropped out of the race, I think that the Libertarian Party needs to have a full-on examination of what went wrong. Because obviously the Democrats aren't going to do that. They are already blaming everybody, and they won't take responsibility for for colossal loss. But I'm not saying we're ever going. But I'm not going to say that the Libertarians are always going to build or have the same momentum they had in 2016. 2016 was a unique time frame, but it really did look like 2020 was kind of the floor for the Libertarian Party. It's either 1% or 1 million votes, something of that nature. This is pretty sad. This is what, 2008 levels?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for what happened. One, Chase Oliver was a terrible candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Barely won the nomination. Really should not have won the nomination. But Libertarians are just idiots in how they run their nominating process. And really, I think the different factions. There were some factions that, if they just would have come together earlier, could have stopped Chase Oliver from winning. But Libertarians like to argue and hate each other, so that didn't happen. But anyway, that aside, there are so many, and I voted for Trump. I've said that on the show. People know that. I know so many Libertarians and people who just didn't vote for Trump in the last two elections who voted for him this time. For a lot of different reasons. The people that he was bringing in with him into the fold, like RFK Jr., Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard.
Mm-hmm.
At the last minute, Ron Paul comes on board with this Doge thing, and there were the tweets going back and forth between Elon and Ron Paul. I know for a fact that won people over. When Trump went on Joe Rogan, that was massive for winning people over. So I would say, if we just to put a number on it, if I called 10 Libertarians I know in the Western Pennsylvania area in 2020, maybe one of them voted for Trump. If I did that again now, I would guess probably 8 voted for Trump. So,
Oh, no doubt about that.
yeah.
I think it was a combination of the photo immediately after getting shot. I think that's I think the best line anybody has ever said is, "That's in the history books from now on." It's like that right there is honestly, and I cannot state that is like such an American photo. And I cannot.
It might be the most American photo.
It's such an
time.
American photo. I cannot. I would say it's the most, but it's probably top 5, if not top 3. I think you could probably find something like, I mean, Buzz Aldrin saluting the flag on the moon. I think is the only thing I could think would be like a little more American than that. But
if that actually happened.
Oh, come on. All right. So, but aside from that, I think a real fast one to talk about the 2024 election. Probably, I don't know if this is actual blunder or not. Like listening to Dave Smith, he says, it's probably the smart thing she didn't go on Rogan. But the funny thing is that last week of the election, you've got Trump going on Rogan. Rogan saves Kamala a spot on the show.
Mm-hmm.
She makes her demands, and if they're not met, then she's not going to do it. She spends like 6 figures to do the Call Her Daddy podcast or whatever, and then.
She spent like to redo the set in order to make it look like they were actually on the regular set, but they weren't. Yeah.
And then the thing is there was so they got like maybe a couple 100,000 views versus Rogan with Trump on having 50 million. Yeah. And then in the ultimate power move, the spot that Kamala had was given to JD Vance. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and that right there sealed the deal. Like, I'm like, why would you do that? Like,
JD Vance was awesome on Rogan. I enjoyed listening to that more than I enjoyed even listening to Trump on Rogan.
I will say this, and I'm willing to eat my own words. When JD Vance was picked, I was like, oh God, this guy's a knave. This guy's like probably gonna be the worst thing. This guy's gonna cost Trump the election, that sort of thing. I've turned a little bit. I think it's because it felt like he was just trying to say whatever was popular. I mean, he basically kind of felt like Mitt Romney 2.0, and this sort of, he just says whatever was popular at the time. And I think you know what? I think this guy actually has had a change of heart. Maybe we'll see. I think it's fascinating. He's like one of the youngest vice presidents ever. It's super interesting is the fact that his entire lifetime, he has only ever known the title former President Carter. If you want to know like a crazy amount of time that is, like he's born after Jimmy Carter left the White House. Like, how insane is that we're gonna have a vice president who was never alive during one of the living president's presidencies?
Yeah,
it's insane.
It is insane. How old? Jimmy Carter's got to be in his 90s.
He's 100. He just turned 100 this past October.
Okay,
yeah. So one of the things I actually do like kind of also like point out in my book too, the whole book series, and I do go into this a little bit more in the second book, is the taboo on certain people allowed to run for political office. And I mean, I don't know what you are, but so I'm Irish and Catholic, and what I've come to find, and I've known this for a little while, but it's literally probably only been the past 20 years it's been acceptable to even be a Catholic in politics in America. There was sort of a second tier or second class sort of
wasn't JFK
Catholic? So Al Smith is the first presidential candidate of a major party who's a Catholic to run or to get their party nomination. That's 1928. The second person is JFK. The second president to be a Catholic is Biden.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
The only 2 vice presidents to be Catholic are Biden and incoming Vance. And Vance converted. So it's like the only reason I bring this up is just because like of every single like religious sect, Catholicism is the largest in the country. But when you put together all of the Protestant blocks, it's different. Because you got like Baptists, evangelicals, like Methodists,
non-denominationals.
But no, if you're just talking about like a single religious
Mhm.
sect, no, Catholics are like 20 to 25% of the population, but they don't vote as a single block. It's pretty split between Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. So it really showcases the diversity of the religion. And I'm not super religious on that matter, but it's something I wanted to like kind of bring up in the
Mhm.
format because it's super weird how you have such a huge amount of people in the country, and yet like when you go back and you listen to like the criticisms of JFK back during the 1960 election for being a Catholic, and you're like the fact that there hasn't been another Catholic president until Biden, almost 60 years later, and you really start to like focus on, man, if the Catholics can't even get elected, well then good luck being anything non-Christian. Which yeah, this isn't about
Yeah,
being,
no.
the religion of the presidency really matters. It just kind of showcases like there was kind of like a up until only recently there was kind of a political class divide regarding religion.
No,
And
I think that's a good observation. And honestly, it's something I haven't put any thought into as why that's the case. I'm sure people have written about it quite a
oh
bit. I'm
yeah.
sure if I looked at it, I could find some stuff to read, which now I'm interested, so I probably will. But it is interesting, and I do think that faith is very important when you are selecting a president, when you're thinking about who you want to support, who you want to vote for. And I think the media would, gloss over this, but I think it's important because, I'm a Christian, and my faith comes into like all of my decision making.
Hmm.
So if I mean, I would not vote for someone who is not leaning on their faith, who is not praying before making huge decisions that are going to impact potentially the entire world. But yeah, no, it really doesn't make sense as to why Catholics didn't have anyone from JFK to Joe Biden. And on top of that, it wasn't really talked about at all with Biden. It wasn't like, this is going to be our first
No.
Catholic president since JFK. It wasn't like even of course, that was just such a ridiculous and odd election, 2020. Almost nothing was talked about Biden. He just ran from his basement and tried to hide, and just everything was just anti-Trump. But anyway,
Yeah, and so it does play a little bit more into the story because Diana marrying JFK Jr., she's marrying an American Irish Catholic, and it's like that's the biggest no-no to the British royal family. It's like the ultimate betrayal sort of thing.
yeah, no, that is interesting angle for sure. I haven't really thought about that, but
And the funny thing is that it's like the real people, like, this is where it gets really eerie. John and Diana married people outside of their age ranges because Diana married Charles, who was like 13 years older than her,
mm-hmm.
and John married Carolyn, who was about 5 years younger than him. And both of them, this is really creepy, both of them married people who had the same or similar names to their siblings.
That
Diana
is
has a
weird.
brother named Charles, and John's sister's name is Caroline. Not Carolyn, but Caroline. And I'm like thinking, okay, that's a little creepy. Like that's like
Yeah.
the amount of similarities between the two of them is so freaky. It's like they were destined to be together. And probably the biggest shock writing all this is I cannot figure out why no one else has done this before me. Because it's right there.
Well, two things to say. One thing: never call a Carolyn a Caroline. She might bite your head off, and vice versa. But second, I agree with you, man, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, of course, because I want to help you get this book known to more people, because I think it could really take off. Because I mean, you have people love the royal family.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are people that they'll consume anything royal family. So you have that side of it, and then you have the Kennedy legacy. People, especially from our parents' generation and older, they're just infatuated with that Kennedy legacy. So there was such an audience to tap into here. There's so much potential.
Yeah, and like real fast, I'll give you this one. So this is one of the news snippets I talk about in the book. So this is from October 29th, 1998. And this is like during this, there's like some serious stuff going on in the book between the two of them. And so this is kind of like a quick break in between that to reiterate that there's still like news going on. And so it says, famed Mercury astronaut and senator from Ohio, John Glenn, has returned to space at the age of 77. Glenn flew aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery for STS-95 and served well as a payload specialist. George Magazine editor John Kennedy remarked that this was a testament to the American spirit, that a person at any age can inspire us all and reach for the stars. Mr. Kennedy then bragged about how he still sleeps under the flag Glenn flew up with in 1962 above his bed. And it's like, and that's from MSNBC. And so the showcases that, like, oh, John's still, like a prominent figure, so he's commenting on, a news event that's ongoing that actually happened. But then it's also like a fun little historical fact that, yes, this was a grown man who actually got the flag because it was given to his father by Glenn. And it's like, this flag was flown. This was the flag that the first man to orbit the Earth for the United States flew up with. And it's like, it's this serious main character energy right there.
Yeah.
And how nobody but him could have done that.
I wonder who actually has the flag now.
That I don't know. So here's the funny thing. He got most, if not like almost everything of his father's. And you're just like thinking, there's in many of the books I listened to or read about him, there's a moment where I guess like one of his roommates had a girl over, and she just like rummaged through the closet to put something on, and she accidentally put on President Kennedy's Air Force One jacket because John had it. It's like, well, where'd you get this? And it's like, I was my roommate's. And then there's just like the moments where he tried so hard to be a normal person that there's a moment where he's like a teenager, and he's at like a boarding school, and he's talking to one of his roommates or friends or something like that, and he's like, "Oh yeah, my mom's gonna be swinging by later on. She's gonna drop something off. If you see her, she's about this tall. She's got brown hair." And then the guy's like, "Dude, I know what your mom looks like." He's like, "Oh." It's like, yeah, who wouldn't know who Jackie O looks like? So, yeah, so the story starts right after his mom dies from cancer. Because his mom died in 94. And which is another weird fact, apparently, was that she was at the same hospital as Richard Nixon. So it's kind of a weird twist on fate sort of thing.
Wow. So tell me this. Writing a book, and you actually are writing 3 books.
Yeah.
What's been your writing process? And like, how have you held yourself accountable? You said you missed deadlines, but every author misses deadlines.
Yeah.
It just happens. How'd you hold yourself accountable to keep progressing forward to finish it?
Well, so most of this was, I wanted to just be heard politically, even in like my local community.
Mm-hmm.
And time again, I've been denied. So this is more or less like political frustrations of a man in his 30s who's just trying to have his voice heard. And time again, I'm denied a seat at a table that I feel like I've outgrown already. And I know so many of us feel the same way, where it's like we're not asking for the megaphone to be in front of the country and be like, oh yeah, like the president needs to listen to me and me alone to make decisions and stuff and that sort of thing. No, but it is like, oh, there's a like my pet issue in my local community was the fact that I feel like our fire department wasn't big enough, and I've been trying time and time again to point out the problems facing a society or a community that doesn't invest in fire protection. And despite being a firefighter, despite being on that fire department at one time, despite all of the knowledge I put out there, I still get ignored by people twice my age who are on the board. And this is just a township. And then I have to think to myself, like, I can't imagine how many other people are like me, where they have the ability to communicate politically, yet are not given that right because they're not a part of the political class, because they're not a part of the people that run things already, that they don't have any influence. And so for this book, it's about taking someone who is destined for political greatness and creating them to be that ideal person. Because the ultimate quote Kennedy has is that people tell him that his father, he says this is, people tell me that my father was a great man, and I believe he was. And they say I can be a great man too, but I'd rather be a good man first.
Mm.
And that really says something, because I mean, like, think about how many times people chase greatness and they stomp over every person in the meantime to do so.
I'll tell you what, man. That I think is the best way to end the interview.
Oh,
I mean, I
gosh.
don't even want to ask you another question, but
All
before
right,
I do
yeah.
let you go, I do want you to tell people where they can get the book, any other plugs you have, and then just any parting words of wisdom, or if there's something I didn't ask you about that you wanna drive home, feel free to do that.
Yeah, so there's a couple more things I want to say on this. So for the book, so the people that have stuck around this long, okay. So first you have to go to books on Amazon. You can't just search it up on Amazon. I don't know why it is that way. I still need to contact Amazon about this. But yeah, when you go to the books section on Amazon, you just look up New York Nobility by Mike Worton, and it'll be there. There's
Well, let me say this, because I had trouble finding the book searching
mhm.
on Amazon, but when I searched on Google for New York Nobility, Mike Warden, it took me to the Amazon page.
Okay,
So,
that works. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, use Google too. And my name is spelled Worton. Um, The book is the first in the trilogy, and it'll have, if you didn't see it visually, it has John and Diana's faces over top of the New York skyline pre 9/11. So the Twin Towers are there, as well as the Statue of Liberty. A lot of this plays in the themes of the book. There's a multitude of different themes. Like I said, sons living in the shadows of their fathers, theme about balance, about what if America had a royal family? Because, like I said, they have children. There's Flynn and Allegra. They are the kids, and they play a huge part later on in the story. They're entirely fictional people. Yeah, that's it right there. Yep.
Yeah, for
Um,
those listening here, I just pulled up the book on the screen, New York Nobility. You can see the beautiful cover. Who designed the cover?
my editor did. So I
Awesome.
said, like, hey, I want this photo, and I want like two of them looking like they're a married couple and stuff. So like they picked, and they're kind of looking at each other a little bit, and so this will play into the next couple covers. There's an introduction of a lot of characters that like get mentioned, or plot points which like affect the story later on. So if you see names that you're not super familiar with, so I will say the one person I want people to be familiar with is a guy by the name of David Bonnier. Do you know who that is? Or
I don't think so.
okay, so he was he basically had Frank Underwood's job. He was the Democratic whip in the House in the 90s. The only reason I bring him up is because he was my former congressman, and I you did not get to the end of this book, but the end of this book, John's popularity, he gets a constitutional amendment passed,
Okay,
and
that's big.
this changes political history to a point where certain people in 2002 and on start winning elections that they weren't supposed to. And one of them is Bonnier, who becomes governor of Michigan. And I keep him around because, well, I think you can guess why he would be in the story electorally, for John's sake.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So let's just say everybody past George W. Bush does not become president.
Interesting.
So in this new timeline, George W. Bush is the last normal president. Everybody else is going to be, and the epilogue will take place this year. Um, I'm not spoiling anything off of that. I'm just going to tell you there's an epilogue, and let's just say there's a bunch of different presidents and vice presidents. Nobody who has served 2009 on will be in the presidency or vice presidency. So it's all different
Okay.
people, all real people though.
So the first book goes. Whoops. Add it up here. It goes from what year to what year? It goes from
So the first book will have it actually does have two prologue chapters, and that is 1963 and 1981. This is when John's father dies, and it's on his birthday. He's the state funeral, and then that's his third birthday. And then in 1981, that's when Diana marries Charles, and she's like immediately regretting it. And it's like the story starts off in 1995, and then so that's 1985 till the till New Year's Eve of 2001. The second book will be the beginning of 2002 up until New Year's Eve of 2008, and then the final book will be 2009 till the end of 2012, and an epilogue of 2024.
awesome. That's exciting stuff, man. Have you laid out when you're going to release the second and third book?
Not like hopefully within this next year. Like I don't know, maybe shoot for sometime in the spring, hopefully for the second one, and then probably by hopefully September or October, maybe the third one.
Awesome. Exciting stuff, man.
Oh yeah,
Exciting
thank you
stuff.
so much. Yeah, this
Happy
is
for you.
super helpful. Thank you for having me on. Yes, this is the whole series is a passion project, and as much as I would love to make a lot of money off of this is more or less like I want people to learn things from this, and I want people to read this and be inspired by hope that, you know, like what could have been if these two people both were alive and didn't die and were together.
I love it, man. Putting your passion to work, writing, not just sitting around tweeting and getting angry with people. Actually
And
creating something. I love it.
and that's the whole thing too. Like I could easily make Facebook posts or write articles or write like a dry political book, but this is kind of a meta commentary here too, because this is basically what George Magazine was trying to do. It's about creating an entertaining format to express political ideas and situations and the histories too, because there's a lot of real history in here, and I want people to know about this. Like I mentioned it briefly in this book, but in the second book, I reiterated a little bit more. My favorite historical fact I learned about this year was that there was a battle in Kosovo in 1999, and a young 25-year-old British captain was leading a military convoy, and one of the characters that will play a big part in book 3 is General Wesley Clark, and I know you're probably familiar with that name, right? Yeah. So he's the NATO commander, and I'm actually a huge fan of his, but he made a huge mistake during Kosovo, and he almost started World War III, and because he orders these troops to go attack an airport with Russian troops, and when John's having a conversation with him in the second book, they kind of go over that and they mention it, and the general says to him, like, I made a mistake back then, I know that now, I was wrong, you know, and so many people were trying to check me on this, including other military officers, and the guy leading it, you know, he's the guy that sang You're Beautiful, and then John's like, oh, me and Diana love that song. And yes, that's my favorite. The favorite thing to learn is that James Blunt stopped World War III in 1999. And you can look that up. That is a real fact. I was like, oh my gosh. Like I got it. It's so like I include fun little stuff. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing. I think if you include fun little historical facts, people tend to be a little more interested in history. Like how Ron Paul delivered Selena. It's like, that's one of my favorite historical facts too. It's like,
yeah, that's true.
Because who doesn't love her? You know, she died so young.
If you can bring together pop culture and politics,
and that's the key thing here. Yeah, and for all the libertarians out there, yes, Ron Paul is in the second book. He and John work together, and yes, they tackle the Fed. So hopefully that's the secret sauce for the next book that a lot of libertarians will want to get a hold of.
Well, that's awesome, man. And I will link to the Amazon link for people to buy the book on the show notes page at lionsofliberty.com. Mike, thank you so much for coming back on the show. We'll have to bring you back when the second one comes out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, it's there. You know, I got this huge manuscript already, so.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
We'll see you.
Thank you so much, and Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you.
All right. See you, Mike. All right, guys, that is a wrap for today's show. As Mike just said, Happy New Year. Looking forward. Merry Christmas. Looking in the past. Whatever you're doing this time of year, stay safe. Be smart. Don't do anything stupid. Enjoy celebrating the holidays with your family and friends. And I will see you all next time with a great new guest right here on Finding Freedom. But in the meantime, always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.